October 14th, 1943, 10:23 a.m., 25,000 feet above Schweinfurt, Germany. Maximilian Steiner sat in the cramped cockpit of his Messerschmitt Bf-109 G6 fingers wrapped around the control stick, eyes scanning the horizon through frosted plexiglass. The thermometer read -42 degrees Fahrenheit. Ice crystals formed at the edges of his oxygen mask. The radio crackled. Static, then voices urgent and overlapping. Achtung, formation approaching. Count 300 bombers. A pause, then revision. Correction, 400 plus. Another voice higher, pitched younger. 99, 500, maybe more. Max keyed his radio. His breath formed clouds inside the mask. Ground control, confirm numbers. 500. Ja, Herr Leutnant. Multiple streams, still counting. Max glanced at his fuel gauge. 340 liters, 58 minutes of combat time. The ammunition counter showed 200 rounds of 20mm cannon shells. 16 seconds of fire if he held the trigger down. 600 rounds of 7.92mm machine gun ammunition. 30 seconds. He'd need every bullet. Next to him, 300 meters off his right wing, flew Alwyn Kessler, 24 years old. Mechanic before the war, now a fighter pilot. Good wingman. Steady hands. Alwyn, Max said into the radio. You hearing these numbers? Yeah. Ground control must be drunk. Let's hope so. But Max didn't believe it. Something felt different today. The intelligence briefing that morning had been tense, nervous energy among the officers. The target was Schweinfurt Ball, bearing factories critical to German war production. The Americans would send everything they had. Still. 500 bombers. Max pulled back on the stick, climbing through a thin layer of cumulus clouds at 23,000 feet. The engine roared 1,275 horsepower, pushing the fighter upward. Climb rate 3,000 feet per minute. His Bf-109 broke through the cloud layer, and Max stopped breathing. The sky, the entire sky, white. Not clouds, contrails. Condensation trails from aircraft engines forming a geometric grid that stretched from horizon to horizon, 40 miles wide, 5 miles deep. Layer upon layer of bomber formations, stacked at different altitudes like a massive aerial staircase, 22,000 feet, 24,000, 26,000. Each formation was a box, 30 B-17 flying fortresses flying in tight defensive arrangement, and there were dozens of boxes, dozens. Max started counting, force of habit, fighter pilot arithmetic, 30 bombers in that box, 60 in those two, 90, 120, 150, 200, 250, 300. He stopped counting. Behind the first wave, more bombers, behind those more still. The contrails merged into a solid white ceiling backlit by morning sun. The sound reached him even through the engine noise and thick canopy. A deep, throbbing rumble. The combined roar of thousands of Wright Cyclone engines. Each B-17 carried 4 engines. Each engine produced 1,200 horsepower. The numbers assembled themselves without effort. 1,000 aircraft, maybe more. 20 million horsepower total. An armada that filled the visible sky. The radio erupted. German voices all speaking at once. Mein Gott! How many are there? I count 40 boxes. 40. Impossible. They're everywhere. Max keyed his mic. His voice came out steady, though his hands had started to shake. Alwyn, how many do you count? A long pause. Then Alwyn's voice quiet. Ich habe bei 300 aufgehört. I stopped counting at 300. Max released the transmit button. His mind raced, calculating, analyzing. 12 Bf-109s in his staffel. Maybe 800 German fighters total defending the entire country. Against 1,000 American aircraft. Simple arithmetic. Even if every German fighter shot down one bomber optimistic, they'd destroy 12% at most. The Americans would still have 850 aircraft over target, and tomorrow, American factories would begin replacing those losses, while German factories bombed repeatedly struggled to replace anything. Max tightened his grip on the stick. The photo in his breast pocket pressed against his chest. Greta and Liesel, his wife, 28, his daughter, 5 years old, both in Berlin, 300 kilometers north. Every bomber he shot down was one less bomb on their heads. He pushed the stick forward, beginning his attack dive, but a voice in the back of his mind whispered what he already knew, what every pilot in the sky that morning would realize within the hour. We've already lost. Not today, not this battle, but the war. 28 months earlier, May 1941, Eastern Front, Ukraine. Maximilian Steiner was 28 years old, newly promoted to lieutenant, and he'd never killed anyone. That was about to change. The Soviet Polikarpov I-16 fighter appeared in his gun sight at 11 o'clock high, silhouetted against white clouds. Stubby fuselage, fixed landing gear. NATO would later call it the Rata, the rat. Soviet pilots called it Ishak, little donkey. Max called it a target. He pulled back on the stick, hauling his Bf-109 F4 into a climbing left turn. G-forces pressed him into his seat. 4 Gs, 5, 6. His vision narrowed at the edges, grey creeping in. He grunted, tensing his leg and stomach muscles, forcing blood back to his brain. The I-16 pilot saw him. Too late. The Soviet fighter broke right, diving for speed, but the Bf-109 was faster. Top speed 370 miles per hour against the I-16's 326. Max had the altitude advantage, energy advantage, training advantage. He rolled inverted, pulling through to follow the dive. The horizon spun. Sky became ground, became sky. The I-16 grew in his Reeve gun sight, the simple crosshair system German fighters used. Max's thumb hovered over the firing button. Range 800 meters. Too far. 600 meters. Still too far for certain kill. 400 meters. The I-16 pilot pulled hard left, trying to use his superior turn rate. Soviet fighters could out-turn German fighters at low speed, but Max wasn't low speed. He was diving at 400 miles per hour engine, screaming propeller a blur. 200 meters. Max pressed the trigger. The 20mm MG FF cannon mounted in the propeller hub fired first. Thump, 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 thump. 4 shells in quick succession. Then the two 7.92mm MG-17 machine guns in the nose. Brrrt! 50 rounds per second combined. Tracers arced across the sky. Every 5th round glowed orange, marking the bullet path. The first 2 cannon shells missed, passing under the I-16's left wing. The third struck the engine cowling. Metal shredded. The fourth hit the cockpit canopy. The I-16 nosed down sharply. Smoke poured from the engine. Flames licked along the fuselage. Max watched the pilot struggle with the canopy, trying to bail out. The canopy wouldn't open. Stuck or damaged. The fighter hit the ground at 4,200 feet, traveling at over 300 miles per hour. The impact threw dirt and debris in all directions. Secondary explosion as the fuel tanks ruptured. Orange fireball. Max pulled out of his dive at 2,000 feet, 7.2 Gs. His vision went completely grey. He couldn't see, couldn't think. Just pulled, trusting his instruments, trusting his training. Vision returned. He was level heading west. His hands shook on the stick. First kill. The Soviet pilot was dead, burned alive or crushed on impact. Max would never know which. He keyed his radio. 1 down. Returning to base. His commander's voice came back. Hauptmann Dietrich von Schell, 38 years old, veteran of the previous war, 18 victories already in this one. Good shooting, Steiner. Come home. Max turned for base. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. That evening, the Staffel celebrated. 12 pilots crowded into the operations tent, passing around a bottle of schnapps. Someone had scrounged real coffee, a luxury on the Eastern Front. The air smelled of tobacco and sweat and engine oil. Von Schell raised his cup. To Lieutenant Steiner, first victory! The pilots cheered. Max forced a smile. He felt nothing. Numb. Alwyn Kessler, the mechanic-turned-pilot, slapped his shoulder. How did it feel? Fast, Max said. Everything happened fast. Gets easier. Did it? Max wasn't sure he wanted it to get easier, but it did. Over the next 28 months, Maximilian Steiner became a different person. The shy schoolteacher's son from Munich disappeared. In his place emerged someone harder, colder, a killer who no longer shook after combat, who slept through the nightmares, who wrote cheerful letters home to Greta and never mentioned the men he killed. By December 1941, 8 victories. By June 1942, 18 victories, and the Iron Cross First Class pinned to his tunic. By March 1943, 28 confirmed kills and a reputation as one of the steadiest pilots in Jagdgeschwader 52. 247 combat missions flown. 42 emergency landings, 3 times shot down, twice wounded, minor injuries both times, shrapnel in his left shoulder from a Leg 3's cannon, burns on his right hand when a fuel line ruptured. He learned the cold logic of air combat, energy management, altitude for speed, speed for position, position for kill. Never turn with an enemy fighter unless you had no choice. Never follow a damaged enemy to the deck where his friends might be waiting. Never assume a kill until you saw the crash or the parachute. And never ever get comfortable. Comfortable pilots died. His aircraft changed as the war progressed. The Bf-109 F4 he flew in 1941 gave way to the G model in 1943. The G6 variant. More powerful engine. 1,475 horsepower from the Daimler-Benz DB605 engine. Top speed, 398 miles per hour at 22,000 feet. Service ceiling 37,000 feet. Upgraded armament, 120mm MG-151 cannon, firing through the propeller hub, 230mm MG-131 machine guns above the engine. More speed, more firepower, but also heavier, less maneuverable. The trade-offs of war. Max learned to love the G6 anyway. It kept him alive. Home became something distant and abstract. Letters from Greta arrived every 2 weeks, delayed by the military postal system. She taught piano to children in Berlin, described Liesel's progress in school. 5 years old now, learning to read. Smart like her mother. The letters never mentioned the bombing. Berlin had been hit repeatedly since 1940, British raids at night. But Greta's letters spoke only of daily life. Shopping, cooking, Liesel's questions about when Papa would come home. Max wrote back with equally cheerful lies. The war was going well. He was safe. He'd be home soon. In September 1943, a letter arrived that broke through Greta's careful optimism. Dearest Max, forgive me for worrying you, but I must tell the truth. Food is scarce. Our ration is now 180 grams of bread per day. Liesel asks if the war will end soon. She doesn't understand why Papa has been gone so long. The bombing grows worse. Last week, 3 buildings on our street were hit. The Millers lost their home. We take shelter in the cellar most nights now. Please stay safe. Liesel needs her father. I need my husband. All my love, Greta. Max read the letter 3 times, folded it carefully. Put it in his breast pocket with the photograph of Greta and Liesel. The photo was creased now, worn from being handled so many times. Greta smiled at the camera, dark hair pulled back, Liesel on her lap. Taken in 1940, before everything changed. He wrote back that night. Liebste Greta, the war will end soon. We are fighting hard. Every mission I fly protects you and Liesel. Hold on a little longer. I think of you every moment. When I am flying, I imagine returning home, walking through the door, seeing Liesel run to me, holding you. That day will come. All my love, Max. He didn't believe his own words anymore, but he sent the letter anyway. By October 1943, the pattern of air combat had shifted dramatically from the early war years. In 1941, German fighters had dominated Eastern Front skies. Soviet aircraft were inferior pilots, poorly trained. Easy victories. Max remembered those days with something like nostalgia. Clear enemies, clean kills, the confidence of superiority. The Western Front was different. The Americans arrived in force in 1942, establishing bases in England. At first, their raids were small, 50 bombers, 100. Nuisance attacks that the Luftwaffe swatted down with acceptable losses. But the numbers grew, 200 bombers, 300. And the American bomber crews learned. Tighter formations, better defensive fire discipline, fighter escorts pushing deeper into German airspace. German tactics evolved in response. Head-on attacks from 12 o'clock high, diving through the formations at maximum speed. Hit the lead bomber, disrupt the formation, break their cohesion. Get in, shoot, get out before the defensive gunners could track you. It worked. Sort of. German fighters shot down 5 to 10% of attacking bombers through the summer of 1943, by traditional military calculus that should have been unsustainable for the Americans. But they kept coming. More bombers, more crews, more missions. August 17th. Regensburg raid. 146 B-17s. Germans shot down 24. 16% losses. Painful for the Americans. 3 weeks later, Stuttgart. 262 B-17s. Germans shot down 45. 17% losses. Devastating. But by October 8th, Emden raid, the loss rate had dropped to 10.7%. 281 bombers, 30 shot down. Max noticed the trend, discussed it with von Schell over coffee one morning. They're learning, Max said. Flying tighter, better formations. Von Schell nodded, lighting a cigarette. His hands were steady, but his eyes looked tired. 48 years old now, which made him ancient for a fighter pilot. He'd flown in the previous war, survived that, and now flew in this one. They're also bringing more each time, von Schell said. Eventually they'll bring so many we can't stop them all. Production. Intelligence briefing last week. Boeing is producing 16 B-17s per day. Consolidated produces 12 B-24s per day. That's 28 heavy bombers. Every single day. Max did the calculation. 28 per day, 840 per month, 10,000 per year. Numbers beyond comprehension for the German aviation industry. How many fighters do we produce? Max asked. Von Schell exhaled smoke slowly. Last month, 276. All types. All fronts. The silence stretched between them. We can't win this, Max said quietly.
No, von Schell agreed. But we can make them pay for every kilometer, every city, every life. Maybe that will matter in the end. Max wasn't sure what end von Schell imagined, but he didn't ask. The replacement pilots arriving in October 1943 frightened Max more than the enemy bombers. Fahnenjunker Emil Schneider reported to the Staffel on October 10th, 4 days before the Schweinfurt raid. 19 years old, bright-eyed, eager.
Herr Leutnant, Emil said, saluting crisply. Fahnenjunker Schneider, reporting for duty. Max returned the salute, studying the boy. And he was a boy, not a man. Thin face, no scars, no hardness in his eyes yet. How many training hours, Schneider? 47, sir. 47. Max kept his voice neutral. He'd had 160 hours of training before his first combat mission. The standard had been 150. And how many hours in the Bf-109? 16, sir. 16. Max turned to von Schell, who stood nearby. Sir, with respect, this is insufficient. Von Schell's expression was grim. It's what we have, Lieutenant. Train him. 4 days. 4 days. To teach a boy with 47 hours total flight time how to survive combat against American bomber formations defended by hundreds of machine guns and escorted by experienced fighter pilots. Impossible. But orders were orders. Max took Emil up 3 times over the next 3 days. Formation flying. Defensive breaks. Attack runs on ground targets simulating bomber formations. Gunnery practice with limited ammunition because ammunition was scarce too. Emil was enthusiastic. Also clumsy, slow to react and prone to panic under pressure. On the second training flight, Max simulated a bounce from above. Emil panicked, pulled too hard and nearly spun the aircraft. Max had to talk him through, the recovery voice calm, while his own heart hammered. After they landed, Max pulled von Schell aside. He's not ready. Make him ready. In 1 more day, impossible. Sir, if he flies tomorrow, he will die. Von Schell's face could have been carved from stone. Then he dies. We need pilots in the air. Every pilot, every mission. The orders come from Luftflotte Reich Command. Galland himself signed them. Adolf Galland, Inspector of Fighters, one of the Luftwaffe's top aces. If Galland said fly, you flew. Max walked back to his quarters that night. The October air was cold stars bright overhead. He thought about Emil. 19. Probably had a girl back home. Mother and father waiting for letters. Tomorrow they'd get a different kind of letter. From von Schell. Formal. Regretful. Your son died heroically in defense of the fatherland. The words would be true. Emil would die heroically if flying into certain death counted as heroism. Max wasn't sure anymore what heroism meant. He sat at the small desk in his quarters and wrote 2 letters. One to Greta. Cheerful. Optimistic. Lies. The second letter remained unwritten, composed only in his head. Addressed to Emil's parents, whoever they were. I'm sorry I couldn't save your son. I tried. It wasn't enough. Nothing is enough anymore. He never wrote that letter. Never would. October 14th dawned clear and cold. Max woke at 5:30 a.m. habit more than necessity. The operations tent was already busy when he arrived 20 minutes later. Ground crews preparing aircraft. Pilots drinking ersatz coffee, the synthetic blend that tasted like burned grain. Real coffee hadn't been seen in months. The briefing began at 6:30 sharp. Von Schell stood before a map of Germany, pointer in hand. Gentlemen, intelligence reports indicate a major American raid today. Target is Schweinfurt, ball-bearing factories, critical infrastructure. He tapped the map. Schweinfurt lay deep in southern Germany near the main river. Expected strength 300 to 400 B-17 bombers. Fighter escorts will accompany to the German border, possibly further. P-47 Thunderbolts confirmed. Possible P-38 Lightnings. Murmurs from the assembled pilots. 300 bombers was a large raid. Not unprecedented anymore, but significant. Our mission is intercept and destroy. We launch at 09:15 hours. Weather will be clear with scattered clouds at 15,000 feet. Combat altitude expected between 22 and 26,000 feet. Questions. No one spoke. Dismissed. Prepare your aircraft. Max walked to his Bf-109, parked in its revetment 50 meters from the operations tent. The ground crew had already warmed the engine, checked the guns, fueled the tanks. Obergefreiter Johann Becker, the crew chief, saluted as Max approached. 42 years old, too old for combat flying, but invaluable as a mechanic. 23 years in the Luftwaffe, including service in the previous war. Aircraft ready, Herr Leutnant. Full fuel load 400 liters. 200 rounds 20mm, 600 rounds 7.92mm. Oil pressure, good, engine temperature's good. She's ready. Thank you, Becker. Max walked around the fighter, performing his own inspection, force of habit, trust but verify. The Bf-109 G6 sat on its narrow landing gear, nose pointed skyward. Yellow number 4 painted on the fuselage. Personal markings, 3 small crosses on the rudder, 1 for each 10 victories. 28 kills total. How many more would he add today? How many men would die because of his skill? He pushed the thought away. Couldn't afford philosophy in combat. Max climbed onto the wing, then into the cockpit. Tight space, cramped. German fighters weren't built for comfort. The parachute pack formed his seat. He strapped in 5-point harness, connected the oxygen hose, radio led, settled the leather flying helmet on his head, goggles pushed up. From his breast pocket, he removed the photograph of Greta and Liesel, looked at it for 10 seconds, put it back. For you, he whispered. No one could hear. The engine coughed, caught, roared to life. 1,275 horsepower shaking the airframe. Max checked his instruments. Oil pressure rising, temperature nominal, fuel flow good. He glanced left. Alwyn's aircraft was starting up blue-grey smoke from the exhaust. Beyond Alwyn, 10 more fighters preparing to launch, including Emil's. The boy sat in his cockpit helmet too large, making him look even younger. Max keyed the radio.
Schneider, stay on my wing. When we engage, do exactly what I do. Understand? Ja, Herr Leutnant.
Emil's voice trembled slightly.
Stay alive, Max thought. Just stay alive through today. At 9:15 a.m. exactly.
Von Schell's voice crackled over the radio.
All aircraft take off in sequence. Form on me after wheels up.
Max released the brakes. The Bf-109 rolled forward tail up, picking up speed. The runway was 2,400 meters of packed earth. Max needed 450 meters. He pulled back on the stick at 115 miles per hour. The fighter lifted off smoothly, gear retracting with a thunk. He climbed in a gentle left turn, watching the altimeter wind upward. 2,000 feet, 5,000, 10,000. The formation assembled around Von Schell's aircraft. 12 fighters in 4 flights of 3. Max flew in the first flight with Alwyn on his right wing and Emil on his left.
Set course 035, Von Schell ordered. Climb to combat altitude.
They flew northeast toward Schweinfurt, climbing steadily. The morning sun burned away the last of the ground mist. Below, the German countryside spread out in a patchwork of fields and forests. Peaceful? Beautiful? Hard to believe a war was happening. At 15,000 feet, they entered scattered clouds. Max checked his oxygen flow. The air was thin up here, cold enough to kill. Temperature dropping with every 1,000 feet of altitude. His instruments told the story 10,000 feet, plus 5 degrees Fahrenheit. 15,000 feet, minus 15 degrees. Oxygen masks activated. 20,000 feet, minus 28 degrees. 25,000 feet, minus 42 degrees. Combat altitude. The radio crackled. Ground control vectoring them toward the enemy formation.
Bandits inbound bearing 040, range 80 kilometers. Large formation. Very large.
A pause.
Count 300 bombers.
Max's pulse quickened. 300, right in the middle of the estimate. 2 minutes later, another update.
Correction. Count revised to 400 plus.
Max frowned. 400 was at the high end of estimates, but possible. 30 seconds later, another voice, higher pitched, younger.
Wir 109. I count 500, maybe more. Multiple streams.
Multiple streams. That was unusual. Normally, American bombers flew in one large formation. Easier to coordinate, concentrate defensive firepower. Multiple streams suggested either a very large raid or multiple targets. Max checked his fuel gauge. 340 liters. 58 minutes of combat.
Ground control.
Von Schell radioed. Confirm numbers. 500 bombers.
Ja, Herr Hauptmann. Still counting. Multiple streams approaching on parallel courses.
Still counting. Max felt ice in his stomach that had nothing to do with the temperature.
Alwyn, he radioed. You hearing this? Ja, ground control must be drunk.
I hope so. But the ice remained. Something was different today, something big. At 9:57 a.m., Max's formation reached 25,000 feet, leveling off. Ahead, a thin layer of cumulus clouds at 23,000 feet. Visibility above the clouds was unlimited. Clear blue sky in all directions. Von Schell's voice. Prepare to engage. Arm weapons. Max flipped the safety covers off his firing buttons. The gun charging handles were already pulled, rounds chambered, ready to fire. The formation flew into the cloud layer. White mist surrounded them for 15 seconds. Visibility dropped to near zero. Max flew on instruments, watching his artificial horizon, trusting the gyroscope. Then they emerged above the clouds, and Maximilian Steiner stopped counting at 300.
The sky ahead wasn't blue anymore. It was white, solid white. A geometric grid of condensation trails spreading from horizon to horizon, 40 miles wide, 5 miles deep. Layer upon layer of bomber formations flying in precise boxes stacked at 22,000, 24,000, 26,000 feet. Max's brain tried to process what his eyes saw. Failed. Tried again. 30 bombers per box. Count the boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He lost track. Started over. 10 boxes visible directly ahead. 20 boxes to the left. More to the right. Behind the first wave, more formations, more contrails stretching back toward England. This wasn't a raid. This was an invasion. An aerial armada that blotted out the sky. The radio exploded with German voices. All calm discipline gone, replaced by shock and fear. Gott im Himmel. How many are there? I count 40 boxes. Impossible. Not possible. They're everywhere. Max's hand tightened on the stick. His mouth was dry. The photograph in his breast pocket pressed against his heart. Greta, Liesel, Berlin. Every one of those bombers carried 8,000 pounds of bombs. If even a fraction reached Berlin, entire neighborhoods would cease to exist. He keyed his radio, forced his voice steady. Alwyn, how many do you count? Silence. Then Alwyn's voice quiet, almost a whisper. Ich habe bei 300 aufgehört. I stopped counting at 300. Max released the transmit button. His mind ran calculations automatically, the cold logic of survival and defeat. 12 German fighters in his formation. Maybe 100 Luftwaffe fighters in range of Schweinfurt. Against 1,000 American aircraft. 12 into 1,000. 1%. Even if they shot down 10% of the bombers, optimistic 900 would reach target. And tomorrow, American factories would replace the losses. While German factories already struggling fell further behind. The equation was clear. Brutal. Unforgiving. We can't win this, Max thought. Not this battle. Not this war. The numbers don't work. Never worked. We just didn't see it until now. But Greta and Liesel were in Berlin, and those bombers were headed toward German cities. Maybe not Berlin today, but soon. Tomorrow. Next week. Every bomber he shot down was one less bomb on his family. Max pushed the stick forward, beginning his attack dive. Behind him, 11 other German fighters followed. Ahead, 1,000 American aircraft flew on steady and unstoppable like cold arithmetic, made manifest in aluminum and steel. The sky had turned white, and Maximilian Steiner knew with absolute certainty that Germany had lost the war. The only question was how many men would die before everyone else realized it too. Max dove toward the nearest bomber formation, his Bf-109 accelerating through 400 miles per hour. The altimeter unwound rapidly. 27,000 feet, 26,000.
25,000. Target box number 7. 30 B-17 flying fortresses arranged in a defensive combat box formation. Lead aircraft at the front and center. High squadron staggered above and behind. Low squadron below and behind. Overlapping fields of fire. 390 machine guns pointing in every direction. Standard German tactics called for a head-on attack from 12 o'clock high. Dive through the formation at maximum speed, fire at the lead bomber, break away before the defensive gunners could track effectively. Speed was life. Hesitation was death. Max's airspeed hit 420 miles per hour. The aircraft shook, control surfaces vibrating. His vision narrowed, focused entirely on the lead B-17 growing in his gun sight. The range closed. 800 meters, 600, 400. Max could read the nose art now. Memphis Belle 2, painted in flowing script. A pin-up girl. Red dress. 200 meters. Max's thumb pressed the firing button. The 20mm MG-151 cannon fired first. Deep hammering thumps that shook the entire aircraft. The cannon was mounted in the propeller hub, firing through the hollow propeller shaft. Each shell was 4 inches long, high explosive. The two 13mm machine guns opened up a fraction of a second later. Higher pitched rattle, 600 rounds per minute each. Every fifth round was a tracer glowing orange as it raced toward the target. Max held the trigger for 2.4 seconds. 148 rounds of 20mm ammunition, 360 rounds of 13mm. 6 cannon shells struck the B-17's nose section. The plexiglass bombardier position shattered. Fragments sprayed. The co-pilot's position took 2 hits. Glass and metal and blood. The forward gun turret sparked, went silent. But the bomber didn't explode, didn't fall, didn't even break formation. It dropped 300 feet, trailing smoke from number 3 engine. The propeller windmilled uselessly. But the pilot pulled it back into position.
The formation tightened, closing the gap. 29 other B-17s flew on unchanged. Max pulled back hard on the stick. 7.8 Gs crushed him into his seat. His vision greyed at the edges. He grunted, tensing every muscle, fighting to keep blood in his brain. The G-suit helped, but not enough. Grey became black. He was blind, flying on instruments he couldn't see, trusting muscle memory. The pressure eased. Vision returned in fragments. Sky, cloud, horizon. Behind him, the bomber formation flew steadily toward Schweinfurt. Ahead, more formations. To the left and right, more still. Max checked his instruments. Oil pressure warning light glowing red. He'd taken hits during the attack, heard the metallic pings but hadn't felt anything. 2 holes in his right wing, another in the tail section, and somewhere an oil line was leaking. 10 minutes, maybe 15 before the engine seized. His ammunition counter showed 52 rounds of 20 millimeters remaining, 480 rounds of 13 millimeters, 1 more attack, maybe 2. The radio crackled. Alwyn's voice strained. Got 1 Box 3 bomber going down. Max looked left, saw a B-17 falling away from Formation 3 engines trailing fire. Small figures tumbling from the bomb bay and waist positions. Parachutes blossoming. 8, 9, crew bailing out. 1 bomber down, 290 still flying. Good kill, Max radioed back. Watch for escorts. As if summoned by his words, silver fighters appeared above the bomber stream. P-47 Thunderbolts, Republic's massive single-engine fighter. 2,000 horsepower. 8 50-caliber machine guns, combat radius extended by drop tanks hanging under the wings. The escorts had arrived early. Usually they turned back at the German border range limited, but these P-47s were pushing deeper, staying with the bombers longer. Another variable in the equation of defeat. Max turned away from the P-47s, looking for another opening. His oil pressure was dropping, temperature rising. The engine would fail soon. Below, he saw Theodor Brenner's yellow number 6 attacking Box 9. Theodor was 26 from Austria, 11 victories. Steady pilot. Good shot. Max watched Theodor's attack run. Perfect approach angle. Good speed. Theodor fired cannon shells walking along the B-17's fuselage. Tail gunner position exploded. Vertical stabilizer shredded. But the bomber held formation. And then the defensive gunners found Theodor. Tracers converged from 3 different B-17s. 30 guns firing. Simple arithmetic concentrated fire from multiple positions. Theodor's Bf-109 sparkled as rounds hit home. Wing, fuselage, canopy, black smoke poured from Theodor's engine. The fighter rolled left inverted, began spinning. Max waited for the canopy to jettison for Theodor to bail out. The canopy stayed closed. The Bf-109 spun into the ground 12 seconds later. No parachute, no chance. Theodor is down, someone said over the radio. Voice flat, emotionless. Too many deaths to process grief anymore. Max forced himself to look away, to focus. He had minutes of flying time remaining before his engine died. Had to make them count. He spotted a B-17 lagging behind Box 12. Damage from another fighter's attack, perhaps. 300 meters behind formation. Struggling. Vulnerable. Max rolled right, diving toward the straggler. This would be easier than attacking the formation. Less defensive fire. Better chance of a kill. His airspeed built. 380, 400, 420. The range narrowed. Max lined up his approach. 1,000 meters, 800, 600. The B-17's tail gunner opened fire. Twin 50-caliber machine guns. Tracers arced toward Max, curving through the air. Most missed. 1 round hit his left wing root. Another pinged off the propeller blade. 400 meters. Max centered the gun sight. He fired. His remaining ammunition poured out. 52 rounds of 20 mm in 3 seconds. 480 rounds of 13 mm in 18 seconds. The B-17's number 2 engine erupted in flames. The left wing shredded. Control surfaces tore away. The bomber rolled onto its back, breaking apart as it fell. Max saw 6 parachutes deploy. 4 men went down with the wreckage. His guns clicked empty. Ammunition exhausted. The engine coughed. Oil pressure 0. Temperature redlined. Schwarzer Blitzist Winchester and damaged, Max radioed. Winchester. Code for out of ammunition. RTB. Return to base. If he could make it. 50 kilometers to Wiesbaden airfield. Engine failing. Altitude 23,000 feet. He could glide maybe 30 kilometers if the engine quit entirely. Max turned west, leaving the bomber stream behind. Below the German countryside spread out peaceful and green. Above the white contrails continued east, an endless stream of aircraft. He damaged 1 bomber, destroyed another. 2 out of approximately 1,000, 0.2%. The arithmetic of futility. Emil Schneider died at 10:34 a.m., 19 years old,
47 hours of flight training, 6 minutes of combat experience. Max didn't see it happen. He was already 3 kilometers away, nursing his damaged engine toward base. But he heard it on the radio, heard the panic in Emil's voice. "They're shooting at me. Too many. I can't." Static. Then von Schell's voice, hard and cold. "Schneider is down. Continue the attack." Max closed his eyes for 2 seconds, opened them, kept flying. The engine was making a grinding sound now, metal on metal, the propeller windmilling roughly. He had maybe 5 minutes before complete failure. He made it 7 minutes. The engine seized at 10:41 a.m., propeller stopping abruptly. Sudden silence except for the wind noise. Max trimmed for best glide speed, 120 miles per hour. Glide ratio roughly 8-to-1 at this weight and configuration. Altitude 19,000 feet. That gave him, Max calculated, 152,000 feet forward travel. 28.8 miles, 46 kilometers. Wiesbaden was 48 kilometers distant. Close, very close. He might make it, might not. Max scanned the ground looking for alternatives. Saw a road running east-west, long and straight, emergency landing site if needed. But he wanted Wiesbaden, wanted maintenance, wanted another aircraft to fly tomorrow, because those bombers would come back tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, forever. He nursed every meter of altitude, adjusting trim, finding the perfect glide speed where drag was minimized and distance maximized. 17,000 feet, 15,000, 12,000. Wiesbaden appeared on the horizon. The grass runway, the hangars, the scattered revetments. 10 kilometers, 8, 6, 5,000 feet altitude. Not enough. He was going to come up short. Max looked for the road again. Found it. Parallel to his flight path, 2 kilometers south. He could make that. Probably. 3,000 feet. 4 kilometers from base. The radio crackled. Becker's voice. The old crew chief. "Schwarzer Blitz, we see you. Runway is clear. Winds light and variable." "Engine is out," Max replied. "May not reach the field." "You'll make it, Herr Leutnant. You always do." 2,000 feet. 2 kilometers. Max did the calculation one more time. The numbers said no. Physics said no. But physics didn't account for will. He held the glide until the last possible moment. The runway threshold passed beneath him at 100 feet altitude, airspeed 110 miles per hour. Slower than ideal. But he was down. Max pulled the nose up slightly, bleeding off speed. 80 miles per hour. 70. The Bf-109 settled onto the grass. Tail wheel first, then mains. Rolled straight, no brakes needed with the engine dead. Came to rest 200 meters down the runway. Silence. Max sat in the cockpit, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. He'd survived. Emil hadn't. Theodore hadn't. How many others? He unstrapped slowly, every movement deliberate. Climbed out onto the wing. His legs were unsteady. He'd been flying at high altitude for over 90 minutes, most of it in combat. The physical toll was cumulative. Becker's truck pulled up beside the aircraft. The old crew chief jumped out smiling. "Good landing, Herr Leutnant, though the engine is finished." "I know." Max looked at the damage. Oil covered the entire lower fuselage. 24 holes from defensive fire. The right wing spar was cracked. This aircraft wouldn't fly again for weeks, if ever. "Come," Becker said. "Debrief in 30 minutes. You should eat something first." Max nodded. Let Becker guide him toward the operations tent. Other fighters were landing, the ones that had survived, the ones with fuel remaining. He counted them automatically. 8, 9, 10, 12 had launched. 10 returned so far. The calculation continued. The debrief began at 11:30 in the operations tent that smelled of cigarette smoke and sweat and fear. Von Schell stood at the front, his face grey, aged 10 years in 3 hours. 10 pilots sat on folding chairs. Max recognized all of them. Alwin Victor Hartung, 4 others whose names he knew. 3 replacement pilots who'd arrived in the past month, whose names he hadn't learned yet. Didn't want to learn. 2 chairs remained empty. Emil, Theodore. Von Schell lit a cigarette with shaking hands, took a long drag, exhaled slowly. "Preliminary numbers," he said. "The Luftwaffe claims 60 B-17s destroyed, 17 more damaged beyond repair. 77 total bombers out of action." A pause. "Our losses?" 38 fighters, 19 pilots killed, 11 wounded, 6 aircraft damaged but repairable. Max did the calculation silently. 38 fighters lost to shoot down 60 bombers. 1.6-to-1 exchange ratio. By traditional calculus, that was a German victory, inflicting greater losses than you sustained. But traditional calculus didn't account for production capacity. How many bombers did they send?
Alwyn asked quietly. Von Schell consulted his notes. Intelligence confirms 291 B-17s in the attack, with fighter escorts, support aircraft and diversionary raids. Total American aircraft over Germany today exceeded 1,000. The silence in the tent was absolute. 10 pilots processing that number, 1,000 aircraft in a single day, a single raid. They lost 77 bombers, Victor said slowly. 26% casualties. That should be unsustainable. Should be, Von Schell agreed. But intelligence also reports American bomber production. Boeing alone produces 16 B-17s per day. Consolidated produces 12 B-24s per day. Combined output 28 heavy bombers daily, 840 per month. More silence. The reality sinking in. They'll replace today's losses in 3 days, Max said. We'll replace ours in, 6 weeks, 2 months. Von Schell didn't answer. Didn't need to. Everyone in the tent understood. Pilot training, someone asked. One of the replacement pilots. American pilot training pipeline produces approximately 800 bomber crews per month, Von Schell said. They graduate from training with 320 hours flight time. Gunnery practice with live ammunition, formation flying, navigation, everything. He paused. Our training program graduated 85 fighter pilots last month. Average flight time 110 hours, down from 150 hours in 1942. Fuel shortages.
We cannot afford extended training. The replacement pilot who'd asked went pale. He probably had 110 hours himself. Barely. So we're losing, Alwyn said flatly. Not a question. A statement of fact. Von Schell met his eyes. We are fulfilling our duty, defending the fatherland. That is what matters. Does it matter if we can't win?
It matters that we fight. Every bomber we destroy is one less bomb on German cities, on our families. Max thought of Greta's letter. 180 grams of bread per day. Liesel asking when Papa would come home. Berlin being bombed nightly. When do we fly again? Max asked. Tomorrow, if weather permits. Intelligence expects another large raid within 48 hours. Of course. Another raid. Another 1,000 aircraft. And another after that. Forever. The debrief continued for 20 more minutes. Technical details, ammunition expenditure, combat observations. But Max barely heard it. His mind was elsewhere running numbers. 77 American bombers destroyed today, at a cost of 38 German fighters and 19 pilots. American production would replace those bombers in 3 days. German production would take 2 months to replace the fighters. The pilot losses were irreplaceable. Training took 18 months minimum, now compressed to 6 months, and producing inferior pilots who died in their first missions. The attrition ratio favored the side with unlimited resources, and America had, for practical purposes, unlimited resources. October 14th, 1943. The day Max saw 1,000 American aircraft and understood the war was lost. The only question remaining was how long until everyone else realized it too. That evening, Max sat in his quarters, a small room with a bed, a desk, a single chair. Sparse, functional. He'd lived in this room for 8 months, never bothered to personalize it. No photographs on the walls, no letters displayed. Just the bare minimum, because eventually someone else would live here. When Max died, his belongings would be packed up, shipped home to Greta, and another pilot would move in. Maybe last a week, maybe a month, if lucky. This room was temporary. Everything was temporary now. Max pulled out paper and pen, began writing. Liebste Greta. Today, I saw the sky filled with American bombers. So many I stopped counting at 300. There were more behind those. More than I've ever seen. More than anyone has seen. Emil died today. He was 19 years old. I tried to train him to prepare him. 4 days wasn't enough. 4 months wouldn't have been enough. The boy had no chance. I know now that we will lose this war. Not because we lack courage, not because we lack skill, but because they have more. More aircraft, more pilots, more fuel, more ammunition, more everything. Every resource that matters in war they have in quantities we cannot match, cannot even imagine matching. But I will continue to fly. Every bomber I shoot down is one less bomb falling on Berlin. One less bomb threatening you and Liesel. That is all I can do. All any of us can do. I love you. I love Liesel. That love is the only reason I climb into the cockpit each morning. Stay safe. Take shelter when the sirens sound. Survive. That is what matters now. Survival. Your Max. He read the letter twice, folded it, put it in an envelope, addressed it. Tomorrow he'd give it to the postal clerk. In a week, maybe 2, Greta would receive it, read it,
understand what he was trying to say without saying directly, "We're losing, but I'm still fighting. For you." Max undressed, lay down on the narrow bed, closed his eyes. Sleep didn't come immediately. His mind replayed the day, the white sky, the endless contrails, Emil's panicked voice on the radio, Theodore spinning toward the ground, the B-17 breaking apart, 6 parachutes deploying, the cold arithmetic of it all.
Eventually, exhaustion won. He slept, dreamed of white skies and falling aircraft, and Greta standing in rubble that used to be their home in Berlin, asking why he hadn't protected them. He woke at 3 a.m., sweat-soaked, heart hammering, lay in darkness for an hour before falling back into uneasy sleep. 3 weeks later, November 3rd, 1943, another raid. Wilhelmshaven on the North Sea coast. Target U-boat facilities. Max flew a replacement Bf-109, his previous aircraft still under repair. This one was older, heavier, slower. The engine rattled at high RPM. The canopy seal leaked, letting in frigid air. But it flew, and it had guns, and that was sufficient. The American formation numbered 360 B-17s. Smaller than Schweinfurt, but still massive. And this time the P-47 escorts pushed deeper into Germany, staying with the bombers almost to target. New tactics, new strategies. The Americans learning, adapting, improving. Max's Staffel had 10 aircraft operational.
2 replacements had arrived to fill the gaps left by Emil and Theodore. Fahnenjunker Bruno Richter, 18 years old, 38 hours, flight training, and Gefreiter Lukas Hoffmann, 20 years old, 52 hours training, children. They sent children to fight the war now. Max flew with Alwyn on his right wing, Bruno on his left. The formation climbed to intercept altitude, 24,000 feet, minus 38 degrees Fahrenheit. They met the bomber stream over Bremen, the same white sky, the same endless rows of B-17s. Not quite as many as Schweinfurt, but enough, always enough. "Attack when ready," von Schell ordered. "Focus on the stragglers." Max dove toward a B-17 trailing the formation. The bomber had battle damage already, 1 engine smoking. Wounded prey. He closed the distance. Half a kilometer, quarter kilometer, firing range. Max pressed the trigger. Cannon shells struck the wing root. The wing folded upwards, structural failure. The bomber rolled inverted, fell. Victory number 30. Not confirmed yet, but Max knew the kill was good. He pulled up looking for another target. Saw Bruno attacking a different bomber. The boy's approach was wrong. Too slow. Wrong angle. The defensive gunners would have an easy shot. "Bruno, brake left," Max shouted into the radio. "Brake now." Too late. Tracers converged on Bruno's fighter. The canopy shattered. The engine exploded. The Bf-109 fell away, tumbling out of control. No parachute. Bruno Richter, 18 years old, died in his first combat mission, 4 minutes after engaging the enemy. 38 hours of flight training. 4 minutes of war. The calculation continued its relentless advance. Max forced himself to focus. Emotions were luxuries fighter pilots couldn't afford. Grief was for later, for the nights, for the letters home. In combat, there was only survival. He spotted another straggler. Attacked. Damaged it severely. The bomber dropped out of formation, 2 engines dead, but the crew kept it flying. His ammunition was running low. He'd expended too much on the first kill. "Winchester," he radioed. "Out of ammunition. Again." "RTB," von Schell replied. "Good hunting." Good hunting. 2 bombers. 1 destroyed, 1 crippled, at the cost of Bruno's life. The exchange rate was terrible and getting worse. Max turned for base, checked his fuel. 30 minutes remaining. Enough. Behind him the bombers flew on toward their target. Ahead, German cities waited. Factories, shipyards, homes. He thought about Bruno. 18. Did the boy have a girlfriend? Parents, siblings Max didn't know. Hadn't asked. Didn't want to know. Easier that way. Easier to forget. Except he wouldn't forget. Would remember all of them. Emil, Theodore, Bruno, the replacement after Bruno, the replacement after that. An endless procession of young men flying to their deaths in aircraft they barely knew how to operate, fighting an enemy they had no hope of defeating. Simple attrition. Germany was bleeding pilots faster than it could train them, losing aircraft faster than factories could build them, consuming fuel reserves while Allied bombing destroyed refineries and synthetic fuel plants. The equation had only one solution, one inevitable conclusion: defeat. Max landed at Wiesbaden 28 minutes later, taxied to his revetment, shut down the engine, sat in silence for 5 minutes before climbing out. Becker approached, face grim. "Bruno didn't make it," Max said quietly. Becker nodded, said nothing. What was there to say? The old mechanic had seen hundreds of pilots come and go.
Young men who arrived enthusiastic, flew a few missions, died. A pattern repeated endlessly. "When's the next replacement arriving?" Max asked. "Tomorrow. 2 of them. Straight from training school."
2 more, with maybe 60 hours flight time between them, who'd last a week if lucky, who'd add their names to the list of the dead. Max walked toward the operations tent. Von Schell would want a debrief. Numbers, statistics, kill claims, damage assessments, the arithmetic of war recorded and filed and forgotten. He paused outside the tent, looking up at the sky. Clear blue. No contrails. The bombers had already passed, already hit their targets, already turned for home. Tomorrow, they'd come back. Different target, same result. German fighters would intercept, shoot down, a few lose pilots, accomplish nothing strategic. And the day after tomorrow, again, and again, and again. Max thought about Greta's letter, about Liesel asking when Papa would come home, about Berlin being bombed and bread rations shrinking and winter approaching. He thought about Bruno, 18 dead after 4 minutes of combat. He thought about the white sky over Schweinfurt. The moment he stopped counting at 300, the moment he understood, then he pushed open the tent flap and went inside to report his kills. Because that was his duty, his only remaining purpose. To fly, to fight, to die eventually, like all the others. The numbers were clear, the conclusion inevitable. But until that conclusion arrived, Max would keep flying, keep fighting, keep trying to protect the people he loved, even though protection was impossible, even though defeat was certain, even though cold logic never lied. Some truths were too terrible to speak aloud. So you flew instead. Let the sky swallow your screams. Let combat burn away the despair. Let duty replace hope. Max sat down for the debrief, began reciting numbers, altitude, airspeed, ammunition expenditure, enemy destroyed, friendly losses, the arithmetic of November 3rd, 1943. One more entry in the ledger of defeat, one more day closer to the inevitable end. Outside, the sky remained blue and empty.
Waiting for tomorrow's white contrails, waiting for the next 1,000 aircraft, waiting for logic to render its final verdict. The answer was already written in the sky. Everyone could see it now. The only question was how long until someone admitted the truth aloud. Germany had lost the air war, lost it on October 14th when Max stopped counting at 300. Everything after that was just arithmetic working itself out to the predetermined conclusion. Some equations had only one solution. This was one of them. Winter came early to Germany in 1943. By December, snow covered the airfield at Wiesbaden. Ground crews worked in freezing temperatures to keep engines' operational oil from solidifying, fuel lines from freezing. Every mission became a battle against weather as much as the enemy. Max flew 17 missions in December, claimed 3 B-17s destroyed, 5 damaged. The numbers no longer meant anything to him. 33 total victories.
Meaningless statistics in a war already lost. The replacement pilots kept arriving. 2 in November, 3 in December. Young faces, eager voices, short lifespans. Max stopped learning their names after Bruno, called them by their aircraft numbers instead. White 7, White 9, White 11. White 7 died on his second mission. White 9 lasted 4 missions. White 11 made it to 8 missions before a P-51 Mustang caught him during a climbing turn. The Mustangs were new, American escorts with longer range, better performance, superior pilots. They could fly all the way to targets deep in Germany and back. The era of unescorted bomber formations was over. Now German fighters faced not only the bombers, but also skilled fighter escorts hunting them. The attrition rate accelerated. On December 19th, Max received a letter from Greta. The envelope was stained, wrinkled, delayed 3 weeks in military postal system.
He opened it in his quarters after a mission that had killed White 9. "Dearest Max, forgive the delay in writing. The postal service is unreliable now. Your last letter reached me only yesterday, dated November 3rd. I must tell you something difficult. The building next to ours was hit on December 8th. Evening raid. Incendiary bombs. The fire spread to 3 adjacent buildings before the fire brigade contained it. We are safe. Liesel and I spent 4 hours in the cellar. She was terrified, asked for you repeatedly. I didn't know what to tell her. Max, I am frightened. The raids grow worse each week, sometimes 3 times a week now. The shelters are crowded. Food is scarce. Liesel is thin. I am thin. Everyone is thin. I know you are fighting to protect us. I know you are doing everything possible. But I must ask, is there any chance we might leave Berlin? Go to the countryside? Somewhere safer? I'm sorry to burden you with this. You have enough worries. But I had to ask. Please stay safe. Come home to us. All my love. Greta." Max read the letter 3 times,
then sat staring at the wall for 20 minutes. Leave Berlin. Yes, they should leave Berlin. Should have left months ago. But bureaucracy complicated everything. Travel permits, ration cards tied to specific districts, housing shortages in rural areas. And his military pay was sent to their Berlin address. Changing addresses meant paperwork delays, potential gaps in payment, all solvable problems. But solving them required time and energy Max didn't have. He flew every other day when weather permitted, spent other days recovering writing reports training replacements who'd die within the week. He pulled out paper and began writing. Liebste Greta, yes, leave Berlin as soon as possible. Go to Aunt Hilda in Bavaria. She wrote last year offering to take you if needed. Accept her offer. I will arrange the paperwork. It may take 2 weeks. Be patient, but pack now.
Take only essentials, documents, photographs, warm clothing. Leave everything else. Berlin is no longer safe. Will only grow worse. You and Liesel must survive. That is what matters. Survival. I will send money for travel. Find someone to help with Liesel on the train. The journey will be difficult. Do this for me, please. I cannot protect you if you remain in Berlin. But Bavaria is safer, rural, fewer targets. I love you both more than words can express. Your Max. He sealed the letter, added it to the outgoing mail pile, hoped it would reach Greta before the next major raid. Then he lay down and tried to sleep. Failed. Spent the night staring at darkness, thinking about White 9, who'd been 19 and had mentioned a girl back home 5 minutes before dying. January 1944 brought Operation Argument. The Americans called it Big Week. 6 days of maximum effort raids against German aircraft production facilities, thousands of sorties, unprecedented scale.
Max flew 4 missions in those 6 days, the sky filled with bombers each time. Not 1,000 like Schweinfurt, but 500, 600, 700. Enough. Always enough. On January 29th, Max encountered P-51 Mustangs for the first time in extended combat. The mission was Berlin, the first major American daylight raid on the capital. Max's Staffel launched with 8 aircraft, all they could get operational. Fuel shortages limited sortie rates now. Luftwaffe Command had to ration aviation fuel across all fronts. They intercepted the bomber stream at 26,000 feet 40 kilometers west of Berlin. 400 B-17s in staggered formations, and above them weaving back and forth silver P-51 Mustangs, at least 200 escorts. Von Schell's voice crackled over the radio. Stay together, attack from altitude, watch for the escorts. Max dove toward the nearest bomber box. Alwyn followed 300 meters back and right. Victor Hartung flew left wing. 3 experienced pilots. Maybe they'd all survive. Max reached 430 miles per hour in his dive. The bombers grew larger. 2,000 meters, 1,500, 1,000. Silver flashes above. P-51s rolling into intercept dives. Fighters high, Alwyn shouted. Max pulled up hard, abandoning the attack. The bombers weren't the threat now. The Mustangs were. He hauled back on the stick, climbing, trying to regain altitude. The P-51s dove faster. They had better dive performance, better acceleration, better everything. A Mustang locked onto Max's tail, 600 meters back, closing rapidly. Max broke hard right, pulling maximum Gs. 7, 8. His vision grayed. The aircraft shook wings, bending stress building. The P-51 followed, tighter turn radius. The American pilot knew what he was doing. Tracers flashed past Max's canopy, 50 caliber rounds, 6 guns firing. He reversed left then right again, jinking randomly. Predictability was death. The Mustang stayed with him. The pilot was good. Maybe very good. Max's altitude was bleeding away. 24,000 feet, 22,000, 20,000. Every maneuver cost energy altitude options. He needed separation, needed advantage, had neither. Another burst of tracers, closer this time. Max felt impacts, heard metal tearing, warning lights lit up his panel, engine temperature rising, oil pressure dropping. Not again. He rolled inverted, pulled through toward the ground. Maximum dive. The engine shrieked RPM redlining, 450 miles per hour, 470, 490. The P-51 followed but couldn't close the gap. At extreme speed, the Bf-109 had slight advantage in dive performance. Slight, but enough. Max leveled at 8,000 feet, looked back. The Mustang was still there, 1 kilometer behind, but no longer closing. The American pilot broke off, climbed back toward the bomber stream.
He'd driven Max away from the bombers. Mission accomplished. No need to risk extended pursuit at low altitude. Smart. Professional. The kind of pilot who'd survive the war. Max checked his instruments. Oil pressure failing. Engine temperature critical. He had maybe 5 minutes of power remaining. He turned southwest away from Berlin, looking for a place to land. Found a road 15 kilometers from the city, long, straight, empty. The engine seized 3 minutes later. Sudden silence except for wind noise. Max glided toward the road, lining up for emergency landing. Altitude 2,000 feet, gear down, flaps down, airspeed 115 miles per hour. The road surface was icy, snow on the shoulders. Max touched down smoothly, but the aircraft skidded immediately. He applied brake pressure carefully, too much, and he'd ground loop spinning into the trees.
The Bf-109 slid 600 meters before stopping angled across the road. Both main gear collapsed from side loads. Max unbuckled, climbed out, stood in snow up to his ankles, breath steaming. His aircraft was finished. Broken landing gear, seized engine, battle damage. It would never fly again. He was 40 kilometers from base, on foot, in January. In enemy territory, technically, though, this was Germany, or what remained of Germany. Max started walking. He reached Wiesbaden 8 hours later after dark, feet frozen, exhausted. A Wehrmacht truck had picked him up after 6 kilometers, driven him most of the way. Becker met him at the gate. "Herr Leutnant, we received your position report from the road. Glad you made it back." "Aircraft is destroyed," Max said. His voice was hoarse from cold. "We'll salvage what we can. Components, instruments. Come. You need hot food and rest." Max let Becker guide him to the mess tent. Ate soup without tasting it. Drank ersatz coffee that warmed his hands, if nothing else. Other pilots filtered in. 6 aircraft had launched. 4 returned. Victor was missing. One of the replacements, White 12, confirmed dead. Radio transmission cut off mid-sentence. Von Schell sat heavily across from Max. "Berlin raid was unsuccessful for us," the Hauptmann said. "We claimed 11 bombers, lost 9 fighters, 4 pilots dead, 2 missing. Victor bailed out over friendly territory, broken leg but alive. 11 bombers out of 400, less than 3%. The numbers grew worse with every mission." "The Mustangs," Max said quietly. "They're changing everything." Von Schell nodded slowly. "Gallen's latest report confirms it. P-51s have combat radius of 750 miles with drop tanks. They can escort bombers to any target in Germany and still have fuel for combat and return flight. We no longer have any period of vulnerability to exploit." 750 miles. That covered all of Germany, all of occupied Europe. Nowhere was safe now. Nowhere was beyond American reach. "How many missions today?" Max asked. "Total American effort. Over 1,000 bomber sorties. 350 fighters shot down over 6 days. Pilot losses." Von Schell paused. "Approximately 150 killed, most with less than 20 combat missions." 150 pilots dead in 6 days. Germany couldn't sustain that attrition rate. The training pipeline was already failing, producing barely competent pilots with inadequate flight hours. Now those pilots were dying before they learned enough to survive even one mission. Simple arithmetic. Fighter pilot force depleting faster than replacement rate. At current attrition, the Luftwaffe fighter force would cease to exist as an effective combat arm within 6 months. "When do I fly again?" Max asked. "Tomorrow. If we can get you an aircraft. We're down to 6 operational fighters." 6. They'd had 12 2 months ago. Attrition, battle damage, maintenance failures, spare parts shortages, the cascade of defeat. Max nodded, finished his soup, walked to his quarters, found a new letter from Greta waiting, dated January 15th, 2 weeks ago. "Dearest Max, we are leaving Berlin tomorrow. Aunt Hilda confirmed we can stay with her. Liesel is excited about the train journey, though she doesn't understand why we're leaving. I packed your letters, the photographs, our wedding picture, everything else we left behind, the apartment we lived in for 6 years, the piano I taught on, everything, left behind. But we will survive. That is what matters, as you said. Thank you for arranging this, for protecting us even from 300 kilometers away. I pray you stay safe. Come back to us when this is over. All my love. Greta." Max read the letter twice. They'd left Berlin 2 weeks ago, were safe now, in Bavaria, away from the heaviest bombing. Liesel would be warm, fed, protected. One burden lifted, the weight of worry about them constant for months, suddenly gone. He could focus entirely on the mission now. No divided attention, no guilt about leaving them in danger while he flew. He lay down, slept for 10 hours, the first solid sleep in weeks. March 1944, 3 months after the realization at Schweinfurt, 5 months before the Allied invasion of France. Max had 41 confirmed victories now, 11 more kills in 3 months. But the numbers were hollow, meaningless. Awards and decorations piled up. Knight's Cross nomination pending. He didn't care. The Staffel had lost 32 pilots since October. 32 names added to the rolls of the dead. Some Max had known, most he'd never learned. They arrived, flew, died, a conveyor belt of sacrifice. Von Schell remained, Alwyn remained, Max remained. 3 survivors from the original 12 who'd flown on October 14th. Everyone else was dead or missing or transferred. The replacement pilots grew younger and less trained. The latest arrivals had 40 hours flight time. 40. They could barely take off and land. Combat maneuvers, gunnery formation flying, no time for training. They learned in combat, usually died learning. On March 6th, Max flew his most difficult mission. Berlin again. 800 B-17s and B-24s. 600 P-51s and P-47s. The largest raid yet on the German capital. American maximum effort demonstrating their ability to strike anywhere in Germany at will. The Staffel launched with 7 aircraft. All that were operational. All that had fuel. Alwyn flew wing. 5 replacements filled the remaining slots. Max didn't know their names. Didn't want to know. They climbed to intercept altitude through clear sky. 28,000 feet. The bombers were at 26,000, stacked in layers. The escorts flew above below on the flanks, a moving fortress of aircraft.
Max selected a target box, began his dive. Silver flashes, P-51s converging from 3 directions. "Break right," Max shouted. "Escorts engaging." The Staffel scattered, each pilot for himself now. No formation integrity, just survival. Max evaded one Mustang, then another. Saw a replacement pilot, White 15, try to turn with a P-51. Fatal error. The Mustang had superior turn performance. White 15's BF-109 shuddered as 50 caliber rounds walked up the fuselage. Engine fire. Smoke. The aircraft rolled, inverted, fell. No parachute. Another replacement, White 14, managed to get behind a bomber. Fired his guns, hit the B-17's wing root. The wing separated. The bomber fell, spinning, crew tumbling out. Then P-51 swarmed White 14, 3 against 1. He had no chance. His aircraft disintegrated under concentrated fire. Max dove away using speed to escape. Ran for 2 minutes at maximum throttle. Fuel gauge dropping rapidly.
He'd burned through half his fuel already, mostly running from escorts. He climbed back toward the bomber stream. Found a lone B-17 straggler. Engine damage falling behind formation. Easy target. Max attacked from 7 o'clock high. Fired. Cannon shells hit the bomber's tail section. Vertical stabilizer shredded. The B-17 nose down, uncontrollable. Victory number 41. But before Max could break away, he heard Alwyn's voice on the radio, strained, desperate. "Max, I'm hit. Engine failure. Bailing out." Max's blood went cold. "Position," he transmitted urgently. "Southwest of Berlin, maybe 30 kilometers. Engine fire. Can't hold it." Max turned immediately, scanning the sky below. Saw a BF-109 trailing smoke descending rapidly. Alwyn's yellow number 2. "Get out," Max shouted. "Bail now." He watched the canopy jettison. Saw Alwyn's figure separate from the aircraft. Parachute deployed. White silk against winter-brown landscape.
The BF-109 hit the ground 8 seconds later. Exploded. Max circled above Alwyn's descending parachute, checking for enemy fighters. Saw none. The P-51s were focused on the bomber stream. Alwyn landed in a field. The parachute collapsed. Max saw him stand wave, alive, on the ground in friendly territory. He'd survive, but the Staffel had lost its best wingman. Max returned to base alone. Fuel critical. The other 5 aircraft, unknown. Radio traffic had gone silent after the first engagement. He landed with 15 liters of fuel remaining. Shut down the engine, sat in silence. Becker approached. "The others?" the old mechanic asked. "Don't know. Alwyn bailed out, southwest of Berlin. Alive." Becker nodded, waited. 10 minutes later, 1 more aircraft returned. Von Schell's. The Hauptmann climbed out slowly, moving like an old man. He was 48, looked 70. "5 aircraft lost," Von Schell said. 3 pilots confirmed dead. 2 missing, probably dead.
Only 2 aircraft had returned from 7 launched. 29% return rate. The arithmetic of March 6, 1944. The day the Staffel died. They'd continue flying, continue fighting, continue dying. But the unit that had existed in October was gone. Destroyed by attrition. Replaced by transient pilots who arrived, flew briefly, disappeared. Max walked to his quarters. Sat at his desk. Tried to write a letter to Greta but couldn't find words. What was there to say? Alwyn is alive but out of the war. 5 more pilots dead. The bombers keep coming. We can't stop them. I'm still flying. I don't know why. He put down the pen. Stared at the blank paper. The photo of Greta and Liesel sat on the desk. Worn. Creased. Faded. He picked it up. Studied Greta's smile. Liesel's bright eyes. They were safe now, in Bavaria, away from the bombing. That was something. That mattered.
But for how long? How long before American bombers reached Bavaria, reached every corner of Germany? The cold logic said months, maybe weeks. Max put the photo down, lay on his bed, didn't sleep, just stared at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle his window, thinking about white skies and numbers and the inevitability of defeat. The final months of Max's war blurred together. April, May, June, July, August. Missions flowed into each other indistinguishable. Faces of replacement pilots blurred, names forgotten before they were learned. D-Day came on June 6th. Allied invasion of Normandy. The Luftwaffe was absent. No fuel to oppose the landings. No aircraft in sufficient numbers. The invasion succeeded while German fighters sat grounded 300 kilometers away. Max watched from Wiesbaden as supply columns moved west to counter the invasion. Watched as Allied fighter bombers strafed those columns. Watched the arithmetic of defeat play out in real time.
The bomber raids continued. Berlin, Munich, Hamburg, every major German city hit repeatedly. Industrial production collapsed. Fuel refineries destroyed. Transportation networks shattered. The German war machine ground to a halt, not from lack of will, but from lack of resources. By August, Max's Staffel could barely sustain operations. Fuel allocation 2 missions per week. Pilot strength 6. Aircraft operational 4. In early August, von Schell was transferred to Bavaria to command a training unit. His replacement was a stranger 26 years old. 30 victories didn't last 3 weeks. Shot down by P-51s over Stuttgart. The new commander after that was a Hauptmann named Weber, 24 years old. He lasted 5 days. Max was the senior pilot now. 31 years old. 41 victories. Ancient for a fighter pilot. By October 1944, 1 year after Schweinfurt, Max had flown over 300 combat missions. The most experienced pilot in the Staffel.
Also the most tired, most hollow, most ready for the end. It came in March 1945. March 15th, 1945. Fürstenfeldbruck Airfield, southwest of Munich. Max sat in the cockpit of his Bf 109, engine off, canopy open. The aircraft hadn't flown in 3 days. No fuel. The aviation fuel had run out 2 weeks ago. Some aircraft still had gasoline, but not enough for combat operations. The Staffel had 8 pilots and 12 aircraft, all grounded, no fuel to fly them. Overhead, the sky filled with contrails. American bombers heading for Munich, 500 B-17s, maybe more. Max didn't count anymore. No German fighters rose to intercept. None could. The fuel was gone. The war was over even if the official surrender hadn't come yet. Max watched the bombers pass overhead. 26,000 feet. Same altitude as Schweinfurt. Same white contrails forming geometric patterns across the sky. He thought about October 14th, 1943, 18 months ago. The day he stopped counting at 300. The day he understood. Herr Leutnant! Becker stood beside the aircraft. The old mechanic was still here, still maintaining aircraft that would never fly again. Ja, the war is over. You know that. Officially. Not officially. But actually, we have no fuel, no ammunition, no spare parts. Munich will fall within days. The Americans are 40 kilometers west. Max nodded. He knew. Everyone knew. What will you do? Becker asked. Surrender, I suppose, when they arrive. Find Greta and Liesel. Go home, if there's a home left. Your family is safe. Last I heard, 2 months ago, Bavaria was quiet then. Probably not quiet anymore. Becker was silent for a moment. You were a good pilot, Herr Leutnant. One of the best I worked with. You survived. That counts for something. Does it? Max climbed out of the cockpit, stood on the wing, looked at his aircraft. White number 4. He'd flown this specific aircraft for 2 months. Before that, 6 others, all damaged or destroyed. How many pilots came through this Staffel? Max asked. Since October 1943. Becker consulted a worn notebook he always carried. 83. And how many are still alive? 7, including you. 7 out of 83. 8% survival rate over 18 months. The arithmetic of attrition calculated to its inevitable conclusion. Max jumped down from the wing, walked toward the operations building. The base was quiet. Most personnel had already left, fleeing west ahead of the American advance. In the operations office, he found personnel files, found his own, read through the mission reports. 312 combat missions, 41 confirmed victories, 32 unconfirmed, 4 aircraft shot down under him, 3 emergency landings, multiple wounds, all minor. He'd survived, through numbers that said he shouldn't. Through attrition that killed 92% of his comrades. Through 18 months of fighting a war already lost. Why, luck maybe. Skill, certainly. But also something else. The photograph in his breast pocket. Greta and Liesel. The reason to survive when others didn't. Max closed the file, left it on the desk. History now. Finished. He walked outside. The contrails overhead were fading. The bombers had passed. Munich was burning. Smoke visible on the horizon. Tomorrow the Americans would arrive. Max would surrender. The war would end officially. And then what? Rebuild? Survive. Find his family. Try to make sense of what they'd all been through. Max sat on the grass outside the operations building. Watched the sky. No more aircraft. No more contrails. Just blue sky and fading smoke. He thought about the day he stopped counting. The white sky over Schweinfurt. The moment he understood the cold logic of defeat. Courage couldn't overcome arithmetic. Quality couldn't overcome quantity. Will couldn't overcome resources. Germany had fought with courage and skill and determination. And lost anyway. Because the numbers didn't work. Never worked. The arithmetic was clear from the beginning if anyone had looked honestly. Max pulled out the photograph. Greta and Liesel. Worn almost to transparency now. But still visible. Still his. "I'm coming home," he whispered to the image. "Finally, I'm coming home." The sky remained empty. The war was over. The numbers had rendered their final verdict. Germany had lost. Max had survived. Those were the only facts that mattered now. Everything else was just numbers in a ledger, statistics in a history book, stories told around tables in years to come. Max stood, walked back to his quarters. Tomorrow would be surrender, the end of one life, the beginning of whatever came next. But today, right now, he sat on his bed and wrote one final letter. Liebste Greta, the war is over.
Not officially, but actually.
I am surrendering tomorrow when the Americans arrive. I am alive, uninjured, ready to come home. I don't know when I will see you. The Americans must process prisoners. But I am coming. Wait for me. 18 months ago, I saw the sky fill with American bombers. So many I stopped counting at 300. That day, I knew we would lose. Knew the arithmetic made defeat inevitable. I was right. We lost, but I survived. And now I can come home to you and Liesel. That is all that matters. Survival. Being together again. Everything else is history. I love you both. I am coming home. Your Max. He sealed the letter. Had no way to mail it. The postal system had collapsed, but he kept it anyway. Would hand-deliver it when he found them. Max lay down. Slept. Dreamed of white skies and falling aircraft, and Greta standing in doorways smiling, welcoming him home. He woke at dawn to the sound of American tanks. Surrender. March 16th, 1945. Morning.
American tanks rolled into Fürstenfeldbruck at dawn. M4 Shermans, white stars painted on turrets. Infantry following behind rifles, ready eyes scanning for threats. Max stood with the remaining pilots in front of the operations building. 7 men. Hands empty. No weapons. No resistance. The grounded Bf-109s sat silent in their revetments, monuments to a war lost. An American captain approached. Young, maybe 25. He looked at the assembled Germans, saw the iron crosses, the medals, the exhaustion carved into faces. "Anyone speak English?" "I do," Max said. His English was accented but clear. He'd learned it in school another lifetime ago. "You're prisoners of war. You'll be processed, transported to a holding facility. Cooperate, and you'll be treated fairly under the Geneva Convention. Understand?" "Yes." The captain looked past Max at the grounded fighters, the empty fuel drums, the silent airfield. "Hell of a war," he said quietly, not gloating, just stating fact.
Yes, Max agreed. Hell of a war. They were loaded onto trucks, driven west, deeper into Allied-controlled territory. Max looked back once at Fürstenfeldbruck, at the Bf-109s sitting silent, at the sky empty of contrails for the first time in years. Empty sky. He'd forgotten what that looked like. The truck drove on, past ruined cities, past refugees, past the wreckage of Germany. Max rode in silence, one hand on the letter in his pocket. The letter to Greta. Soon he'd deliver it. Soon he'd be home. The war was over. May 1946. Bavaria. 15 months after surrender. Max stood outside a small house in the countryside. Mountains visible in the distance. Green fields. Peace. The sound of cowbells in the valley below. He'd been released from the POW camp 3 weeks ago. Papers processed. Travel documents issued. The journey from the Rhine to Bavaria had taken 5 days on damaged rail lines through cities still clearing rubble.
Now he stood at Aunt Hilda's house.
where Greta and Liesel had lived for 16 months. Max knocked on the door. His hands were shaking. Footsteps inside. The door opened. Greta stood there. She was thin, older than her 30 years, but alive. She saw him and stopped breathing. Max. Leaps to Greta. They held each other for 5 minutes without speaking. Max felt her shake, heard her sob, held her tighter. Then Liesel appeared 9 years old now, taller, barely recognizing the father she hadn't seen in 2 years. Papa. Max knelt, opened his arms. She came to him slowly, uncertain, then faster. They embraced. I'm home, Max said. I'm finally home. That night after Liesel slept, Greta asked the question. Was it worth it, all those years? All that fighting? Max thought for a long time before answering. No. We lost. Everyone knew we would lose. The numbers were clear. We fought anyway because we had no choice, or thought we had no choice. Do you regret it? I regret that it happened at all. That men died for nothing, that cities burned, that families were destroyed. But I don't regret trying to protect you and Liesel. That was the only thing that mattered. Greta held his hand. You survived. That's what matters. You came home. Max nodded. But late that night, lying in bed, he thought about the others. Alwyn, Victor, Theodore, Emile, Bruno. 83 pilots, 76 dead. And he thought about October 14th, 1943, the day the sky turned white, the day he stopped counting at 300, the day the arithmetic of defeat became undeniable. 41 victories, meaningless against 96,000 American aircraft produced in 1944. His 41 divided by 96,000 equaled 0.0043, 4/10,000ths of 1%. That was the arithmetic of his war, numbers meeting infinite resources. Max closed his eyes. Tomorrow he'd work on rebuilding, on healing, on forgetting. But he'd never forget the white sky, the endless contrails. The moment understanding arrived with perfect, terrible clarity. They'd lost. Not because they lacked courage, not because they lacked skill, but because arithmetic never lies. And in war, as in everything, numbers are the final truth. Max slept, dreamed of blue skies, empty skies, peaceful skies. The war was over. The numbers had spoken, and somehow impossibly he'd survived to see what came after. 1965. 20 years later. Munich Airport. Maximilian Steiner stood outside the terminal watching commercial jets take off. Lufthansa 707s, Pan Am flights. The sky filled with civilian aircraft now. Peaceful air traffic, business travelers, families on vacation. His daughter Liesel stood beside him, 29 years old, a teacher like her mother had been. Her son, Max's grandson, was 7. The boy watched the planes with fascination. Opa, the boy said, using the German word for grandfather. Mama says you flew in the war. Max looked at Liesel. She nodded permission. Yes, I flew fighters. Were you a hero? Max was silent for a long moment. Thought about October 14th, 1943, the white sky, stopping counting at 300, Emile, Theodore, Bruno, Alwyn, 83 pilots, 76 dead. He thought about the arithmetic, 41 victories against 96,000, the cold logic of defeat. No, he said finally. I wasn't a hero. I was just a man who survived when most didn't. Why did you survive? Max looked at Liesel, at his grandson, at Greta, 63, now standing by the car, hair grey but eyes still bright. Because I had something to come home to. The boy didn't understand yet. Would someday. A Lufthansa jet thundered overhead, climbing into blue sky. No contrails today. Temperature too warm. Max remembered another sky, white with contrails, filled with 1,000 bombers. The day he stopped counting. The day the arithmetic became undeniable. 22 years ago. A lifetime. Another world. Opa, what are you thinking? Max looked at the empty sky. Blue, clear, peaceful. I'm thinking the sky looks better this way, he said. Come, let's go home. They walked to the car. The jets continued overhead. Peaceful, commercial. Carrying families on vacation, businessmen to meetings. Not bombs, not death. The arithmetic of peace were different from the arithmetic of war. in peace numbers built instead of destroyed, created instead of killed. Max had 41 victories in the war, meaningless numbers now. What mattered was sitting in the car beside him. Greta, Liesel, his grandson, the logic of survival, the only equation that ever really mattered. They drove home through Munich, rebuilt from rubble, past where the old apartment had stood, past the airfield, now a park, children playing where fighters once launched. The past was past. The sky was empty, and Max had lived to see what came after. He thought about that day in 1943, the white sky. The moment he stopped counting. Ich habe bei 300 aufgehört, he murmured. I stopped counting at 300. Greta heard him, reached over, took his hand. And you lived to tell about it. Max nodded, looked out the window at the rebuilt city, at the children playing, at the peaceful sky. The arithmetic had been brutal. The war had been lost. But he'd survived, and in the end, survival was the only number that mattered. They drove home. The sky remained blue and empty. No contrails, no bombers, no war, just peace, and Max, and the family he'd come home to. That was enough.